Cliché podcast. Your silence hurts us. Podcast. Your silence hurts us. Quote. Over the air radio Alamal FM on 95.5 to 98.8 megahertz. The podcast, Your Silence Hurts Us, part of the Women Peacemakers Project. Implemented by Alamal Women's and Sociocultural Foundation. The podcast, Your Silence Hurts Us. Produced by Hadramaut Media and Development Foundation Radio Alamal FM. Prepared by Shadi Muhammad and Amar bin Johar. Presented by Kamar Sami. Editing and audio engineering, Amar Salem. Supervisor, Salwa Muhammad Bakhtar. Dear listeners, welcome to a new episode of the podcast. Your silence hurts us. You are welcome again on Alamal FM Radio 89.8 and 95.5 megahertz. Dear listeners, in this episode, we will talk about the psychological and social effects that a woman human rights activist or defender is subjected to abuse and violence. Today's episode is the second one of the podcast. Your silence hurts yous. Those who did not listen to the last episode will find it on the radio page and the campaign pages on social media sites. Any questions and comments about the episode topics are welcome on our social media sites. Before we start the topic of today's episode, we will take a short break about the podcast and the campaign of Your Silence Hurts Us, and we will be back. The beginning of the Focus View, introducing the campaign through the Focus View report. The Your Silence Hurts Us campaign comes within the Peacemakers project funded by DTI to achieve justice within the Justice for Yemen Pact, which aims to monitor violations resulting from the conflict in Yemen. The project works to build the capacity of monitors and workers in the specialized Together for Her network in monitoring and documenting violations against abused women and activists defending women's rights and human rights in Hadramaut. The Women Peacemakers project will last for 19 months and includes several different activities that contribute to the process of monitoring violations for justice within the Justice for Yemen Pact. The campaign, Your Silence Hurts Us, aims to mobilize and finance local and international support to improve the protection of activists defending women's rights and human rights. Improving the image of women defenders within society and increasing community awareness about violations in general and violations against women defenders in particular. The campaign, Your Silence Hurts Us, was launched coinciding with the approaching 16-day activities to combat violence against women, which focuses light on the violations suffered by women and human rights defenders. The campaign adopts a message not to be silent about violations against women activists and defenders. The campaign encourages female activists to reveal what they are subjected to violations and clarify the challenges they face while defending women's rights and human rights. Dear listeners, the campaign, Your Silence Hurts Us, has various activities, including this podcast, Your Silence Hurts Us, which you are listening to Alamal FM Radio. There are other activities on mass media and social media sites, including positive messages and articles about women defender activists, and a workshop that will be carried out by organizations within the Justice for Yemen Pact, to discuss all aspects that contribute to the protection of women defender activists. The end of Focus View, introducing the campaign through the Focus View report. Dear listeners, we are back again to talk about the psychological and social effects that violation and violence have on Yemeni activists and defenders of women's or human rights. Women in our society and most societies have a very special status, as social and statutory laws, as well as Islamic law, guarantee them to live with human dignity consistent with their psychological and biological nature, whether in situations of both war and peace. However, as the pace of conflict increases, the matter may get out of control and the rate of human violations will increase, with women being the group most vulnerable to violence and abuse due to their nature. With the presence of women activists and defenders for women's rights in particular and human rights, in general in light of wars and conflicts, these violations also affect women activists and defenders more strongly, resulting in psychological and social effects for the women activists and defenders. Some studies in Yemen have sought to discuss the violence associated with female activists and defenders as a special type of violation and the resulting problems, psychological or physical effects, and social effects that may be restrictions imposed by customs and traditions. Dear listeners, to know about these effects, we must clarify that they may differ from one activist to another, depending on the reaction and response to the violation by the activist and defender herself. There are psychological and societal effects that may result immediately from being subjected to the violation, while there are other effects that result from the activist's silence regarding the violation and her silence about her rights. Let us have a short break and then we'll be back to our discussion about these effects. Whatever the type of violation, the impact it leaves on the activist's psyche immediately after she is exposed to it is as follows: depression, anxiety, and despair about the future. Insomnia, shortness of breath, and poor memory. Suffering from chronic diseases such as high blood pressure, heart rate, and diabetes. Constant feelings of anger, self-flagellation, and thoughts of suicide. Injuries, wounds, fractures, or loss of organs if the violation was physical. It may result in disability. The same applies to the social effects that the violation has on the activist. Complete isolation from society. Restrictions that may be imposed on her by her family or husband. The negative view of society that the violation leaves. Stop working as an activist and avoid defending other women or any violating person, thus increasing the incidence of human rights violations in society, specifically women. We remind our esteemed listeners once again. The effects that the violation leaves on the activist and defender may occur immediately after the violation occurs. However, they may increase and worsen negatively if she continues to be exposed to the violation. There is no continuous violence or exploitation unless the activist keeps quiet about it and is silent about her rights, despite the many reasons that make the activist or the defender prefers to keep quiet about the abuse she was subjected to, which we will review for you in other episodes, but the result of this secrecy heralds worse on the psychological and societal levels for the activist herself and for other women who will be exposed to more violations in the absence of the activist who preferred to surrender and leave the field of freedom and justice. Activist defender. If you are listening to us, do not remain silent about any violence you have been subjected to. And know that your silence about your rights means losing the rights of others. Dear listener, if you know an activist or defender in your area or your family who has been subjected to exploitation, send our message to her. Encourage her to speak up and take her rights from the party that committed violence and abuse against her. Dear listeners, we have reached the end of our episode of the Your Silence Hurts Us podcast, in which we reviewed for you the psychological and social effects left by the exposure of an activist and defender of women and human rights to abuse and violence. Before we have finished, we renew our reminder of the Together for Her network, which is a Yemeni network that works to monitor and document cases of violations that women are subjected to due to the war, and today it opens its arms to all Yemeni women activists and defenders who have been subjected to exploitation to report any case of violation through the network's application. In the Google Play Store or by calling the following number, 776,520,320. The network will provide all necessary support to all women, activists, and defenders who have been subjected to violation and abuse. We leave you in Allah's protection. Waiting for the next episode.